My name is Patricia Monroe. I am 64 years old. I am a widow. And 1 year after my husband died, I learned that grief was not the most dangerous thing a woman could face. The call came while I was sitting in church on a quiet Sunday morning. The hymn had just begun. I should have silenced my phone, but at my age, habits change slowly. The screen showed the name of the renovation contractor working on my house. Before I answered, I felt a tight pull in my chest, a warning I could not explain. He did not waste time. He said I needed to come home immediately. Then his voice dropped. He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "Do not come alone. Bring both your sons." I asked what was wrong. He said he could not explain it over the phone. What they found was not damage. It was not a mistake. It was something intentional, something hidden. The line went dead. I sat frozen in the pew, unable to move. 1 year earlier, I had buried my Edward Monroe, a respected lawyer, a quiet man, a man I believed I understood after 41 years of marriage. 3 weeks ago, I had finally decided to renovate his old office. I wanted to turn it into a small library, a calm place, a place for my grandchildren. Instead, I was being called back to my house like someone had opened a door that was never meant to be found. As I stood to leave the church, one thought settled deep in my chest. Whatever was waiting for me behind those walls had been hidden on purpose. And my husband never planned for me to see it. Before I tell you what we found, you need to understand who Edward Monroe was to me, or at least who I believed he was. Edward was not a loud man. He never needed to be. People listened when he spoke because his words were measured and precise. He had been a lawyer for more than 40 years, respected in our town, trusted by people who valued discretion over drama. To me, he was simply my husband. We met in our early 20s. He was serious even then, careful, observant. He remembered details most people forgot. The name of a waiter, a passing comment at a dinner party, a hesitation in someone's voice. I used to joke that Edward noticed things so I did not have to. We were married for 41 years. We raised 2 sons. We paid our mortgage. We attended school events and holiday dinners, and neighborhood fundraisers. There were no scandals, no whispered rumors, no public cracks. When Edward died of a heart attack, the shock nearly broke me. One moment he was in his office preparing documents. The next he was gone, just like that. After the funeral, I closed the door to his office and never opened it again. It felt wrong, like disturbing something sacred. That room held his absence too loudly. Friends told me grief fades with time. They were wrong. It changes shape, but it never leaves. 3 weeks ago, on what would have been our 42nd wedding anniversary, I made a decision. I could not live around a sealed room forever. I wanted to turn that space into something warm, something forward-looking. A library, shelves, light, a place where silence felt peaceful instead of heavy. I told myself this was about healing. I did not know it was about truth. Because Edward Monroe, the man I loved, the man I trusted, had built a life that ran far deeper than the one I shared with him. And I was about to step straight into it. I called my sons from the church parking lot. Colin answered first, my oldest, a corporate lawyer like his father, direct, efficient, always thinking 3 steps ahead. I told him I needed him at the house immediately. I told him to bring his brother. Samuel answered next, my youngest, a high school teacher, gentle, thoughtful. He heard the strain in my voice before I finished my sentence. He did not ask questions. He just said he was on his way. We arrived separately but within minutes of each other. My car pulled into the driveway and I saw them standing near the front steps, side by side, tense. They had barely spoken since their father's funeral. Grief had pulled them in different directions. Colin wore the same controlled expression he used in court, jaw set, shoulders straight. Samuel stood with his hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the house as if he sensed something was wrong. The contractor was waiting for us. He looked uncomfortable, not nervous in the way people get when something breaks, nervous in the way people get when they find something they were never meant to see. He greeted me quietly and nodded to my sons. He did not smile. Inside the house, everything felt off. The familiar hallway sounded hollow without the carpet. The air smelled like dust and exposed wood. Edward's presence was gone, but something else had taken its place. Something watchful. The contractor led us toward the office without explaining anything further. With each step, my chest tightened. I felt like I was walking into a conversation that had started years ago without me. Colin finally broke the silence and asked what exactly they had found. The contractor stopped in front of the office door and looked at me instead of answering him. He said it would be better if we saw it for ourselves. That was the moment I understood this was not about a renovation anymore. This was about something my husband had built, something he had hidden, and something he never expected his family to discover together. Edward's office did not look like the room I remembered. The bookshelves were gone, the desk had been moved, the wallpaper had been stripped away, leaving raw drywall and exposed studs. It felt less like a renovation and more like an excavation. 2 workers stood near the back wall. They were quiet, too quiet. One of them avoided my eyes entirely. The contractor stepped forward and pointed behind where Edward's desk had always been. The wall was missing. Not damaged, not partially opened, completely removed. Behind it was a narrow room I had never known existed. It was small, no bigger than a walk-in closet, lit by temporary work lights. The walls were bare and unpainted. There were no windows, just shelves, dozens of them, floor to ceiling. Every shelf was filled with folders. They were not dusty, they were not random, they were organized with care, each one labeled, each one placed deliberately. I recognized Edward's handwriting immediately. Clean. Precise. The same writing he used on birthday cards and legal briefs. My legs felt weak. I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. The contractor explained that the wall had been built as a false panel, double-layered, professionally done, hidden behind the trim and shelving so perfectly that no one would ever notice unless the wall was opened. He said it must have been there for decades. Colin stepped into the room first. He reached for a folder and pulled it from the shelf. His face changed as he opened it. The color drained from his skin. Samuel picked up another and froze. I reached for one at random. Inside were photographs, financial documents, notes written in Edward's hand, dates, locations, names. Some of the names I did not recognize. Some of them I did. People from our town. Business owners, a former mayor, a school administrator, men and women who had sat at my dinner table and smiled. This was not storage. This was not research. This was a system. And as I stood in that hidden room, surrounded by evidence of a life my husband had kept entirely separate from ours, one thought echoed louder than the rest. Edward had not been hiding things. He had been hiding people. Once I understood what the room was, I could not unsee it. Every folder followed the same pattern: photographs first, then documents, bank statements, property records, court filings that never made it to court, finally, handwritten notes in Edward's careful script. Observations, timelines, weak points. This was not curiosity, this was leverage. Colin began pulling files faster now, his lawyer's mind already working. He scanned pages the way he reviewed contracts, searching for intent, for legality, for some explanation that made this less horrifying. Samuel moved more slowly. He lingered on the photographs, faces, moments captured without consent, people unaware they were being watched. His hands shook as he set one folder down. Then he picked up another. This one had no name on the tab. Just a date. June 1992. Samuel opened it, and the photographs slid out onto the floor. I bent to gather them, and my breath caught halfway down. The woman in the photos was younger, but I knew her instantly. It was me. Not posed, not smiling. Caught entering buildings, leaving restaurants, standing beside Edward in places I did not remember being photographed. Receipts followed, hotel bills, travel records, dates I recognized but had never questioned. Colin stared at the papers, his voice low and disbelieving. Why would Dad keep a file on you? I did not answer. I could not. Because suddenly every argument Edward and I had ever avoided, every trip he insisted was necessary, every silence I had learned to live with, rearranged themselves into something darker. Samuel whispered something that made my stomach drop. Mom, look at the notes. At the top of the page, in Edward's handwriting, were words I never imagined he would write about his own wife. Subject protected, risk ongoing. I felt something inside me fracture quietly. This room was not just about power over others. It was about control. And whatever Edward had been protecting me from, he had built an entire hidden life around it. The worst part was not the fear. It was the realization that my husband had been watching me too. At the back of the hidden room, partially concealed behind the shelves, was a small metal safe set directly into the wall. The contractor told us they had not opened it. Something about it felt wrong to them, like crossing a line that could not be uncrossed. Colin knelt in front of it immediately. He recognized the model, digital lock, 4 digits. He asked if I knew Edward's codes. I did not answer right away. My mind was still fixed on the file with my name on it, on the word protected written in my husband's hand. Samuel spoke quietly. Try the anniversary. Colin entered the numbers. The safe beeped once, then clicked open. Inside was not what I expected. There was a leather-bound notebook, a stack of vase tapes, each carefully labeled with dates going back decades, a handgun wrapped in cloth, and beneath it all, a passport. Edward's photograph stared back at us from the page. But the name was not his. Colin stood slowly, holding the passport like it might burn him. Dad had a second identity. The notebook was worse. It was a ledger, dates, names, dollar amounts, payments received, services rendered, written with the same calm precision Edward used in everything else. Samuel flipped through the pages, his face pale. These are not legal fees. No, they were not. They were payments for silence. Colin's voice tightened. He said maybe there was another explanation. Maybe these were confidential settlements. Maybe there was context we were missing. But even he could not convince himself. I looked at the manila folders lining the walls, at the safe, at the gun, at the false identity. Edward Monroe had not just been hiding information. He had been living 2 lives. And the one I never saw was the one that had real power. The knock came less than 30 minutes later. Not from the contractor, not from a neighbor curious about the noise. From the law. A man stood at my front door with a badge clipped to his belt and a calm expression that told me he already knew more than he was saying. He introduced himself as Deputy Marshal Daniel Reyes. He said he was investigating irregularities connected to my late husband's law firm. He said Edward Monroe's former partner had disappeared 3 days earlier. He said several trust accounts had been emptied just before that disappearance. Colin immediately stepped forward, his voice professional, controlled. He asked if my mother was under investigation. Reyes shook his head. He said no, not at this moment. But then his eyes moved past us, past the living room, past the hallway. They stopped on the open doorway to Edward's office. He asked one careful question. Mrs. Monroe, have you recently accessed your husband's private records? Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Stop looking. My stomach dropped. Reyes saw my expression change. He asked to see the message. His jaw tightened as he read it. That was when the brick came through the living room window. Glass shattered. The sound was sharp and violent. Samuel pulled me down behind the couch while Colin shouted for everyone to get back. Wrapped around the brick was a folded piece of paper. A list of names. Mine. My son's. Reyes did not hesitate. He spoke into his radio and called for immediate protection. Within minutes, federal vehicles filled the street. As agents moved through my home, sealing it off like a crime scene, Reyes looked at me with steady eyes. Whatever your husband was involved in, he said quietly, someone knows you found it. And they are afraid of what you might uncover next. That was the moment I realized this was no longer about my past. This was about our survival. They moved us that night. No explanations, no choices, just instructions. Pack essentials, leave everything else behind. By midnight, my sons and I were sitting in a government safe house an hour outside town. A plain building, neutral colors, the kind of place designed to be forgotten. That was where the next truth found me. He arrived quietly, without announcement, a familiar face that instantly made my skin crawl for reasons I could not yet name. Dr. Samuel Boyd, our family physician for over 20 years. He asked to speak with me alone. Reyes stayed in the room, standing near the door. Dr. Boyd did not sit down. He said there was something I needed to know, something Edward had asked him to keep quiet unless everything went wrong. "Everything has gone wrong," I said. He nodded once. Then he told me my name was not Patricia Monroe. He said Patricia Monroe did not exist until I was 7 years old. Before that, I was someone else. A child who survived a house fire in another state, a fire that killed both parents, a fire officially ruled an accident. But it was not an accident. I was the only witness. My adoption records were altered, my identity rebuilt, my memories softened with time and careful silence. Edward discovered the truth while researching my background before our wedding. He did not tell me. He chose instead to protect me. Every file in that room, every secret Edward collected, every person he held leverage over. It was all built around one purpose: keeping me alive. I felt numb as the words settled. My husband had not been paranoid. He had been preparing. Dr. Boyd looked at me with something like regret. He said Edward believed that if I ever learned the truth, it would mean the protection had failed. I looked at my sons. Their faces reflected shock, anger, fear. And beneath it all, one devastating realization. The danger did not begin when we opened that wall. The danger had followed me my entire life. Edward had just been standing between me and it. The threats did not come for me first. They came for my children. Colin was the first to receive the call, a partner from his firm. The tone was polite but distant. An ethics complaint had been filed. Anonymous, detailed, carefully constructed. Allegations that questioned his professional judgment and integrity. By the end of the day, he was placed on administrative review. Samuel's turn came the next morning. The school district sent an email requesting an urgent meeting. Concerns had been raised. Rumors, accusations vague enough to linger even if proven false, the kind that stain a reputation without ever needing evidence. I watched my sons read their messages in silence. This was not random. This was precision. Someone was dismantling them piece by piece, targeting the parts of their lives that mattered most. Careers they had built, identities they had earned, futures they had planned. Colin blamed himself. He said this was the cost of opening the files, of letting curiosity outweigh caution. Samuel blamed Edward. He said no amount of protection justified putting the family in this position. They argued for the first time in months. Grief sharpened into anger. Fear turned into accusation. I listened without interrupting. Then I told them the truth. I told them Edward had not built those files to control people. He built them to buy time, to create distance between me and the people who wanted me erased. And now that Edward was gone, that time had run out. That was when Colin understood something that changed his expression completely. "They are not trying to scare us," he said quietly. "They are trying to break us. Because broken people stop asking questions." I looked at my sons and felt a familiar instinct rise, older than fear, stronger than confusion. If someone wanted to hurt my children to keep the truth buried, then the truth was exactly what we needed to find. And I was done being protected in silence. If they wanted a war of patience, they had underestimated one thing. A mother who has nothing left to lose is not afraid of waiting. She is afraid of doing nothing. The final piece came from one of the Vuz tapes in Edward's safe. Deputy Marshal Reyes brought in an old player the next morning. He warned us that whatever was on the tape could change everything. He was right. The recording opened with Edward sitting at a desk I did not recognize. His face looked older than I remembered. Tired, alert, as if he knew time was running out. He stated the date. Then he said my name. "Patricia, if you are watching this, it means I was right. It means the protection failed." My chest tightened as his voice filled the room. Edward explained that 3 weeks before his death, someone contacted him anonymously. They claimed to know the truth about the fire that killed my parents. They wanted to trade a name for freedom from the leverage Edward held over them. The meeting took place in an abandoned building outside town. Edward recorded everything. The screen shifted to grainy footage of the meeting itself. 2 figures sat across from each other, faces partially hidden, voices low. The second person spoke. They said the fire was never meant to leave a witness. They said the man who said it had lived openly for decades under a different name, trusted, respected, protected by his own position. Edward leaned closer to the camera in the recording. He said the killer was not someone distant. He was someone close. Someone who attended church. Someone who shook hands at funerals. Someone who knew our family. Then Edward said something that made my blood run cold. "If anything happens to me," he said, "do not trust the familiar. The most dangerous people are the ones who blend in best." The tape ended abruptly. No name, no arrest, just a warning. Silence filled the room. Rise looked at me carefully and said the words I had been avoiding. "Your husband did not die of natural causes." He was silenced. And whoever did it was still watching. For the first time since Edward's death, my grief changed shape. It hardened. Because this was no longer about discovering the past. It was about stopping someone who believed they could erase us quietly. And I was done letting them. We returned to the house that evening under federal escort. Agents secured the street. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. The home I had lived in for decades felt unfamiliar, like a stage set for something final. Inside, the air was still, too still. That was when the doorbell rang. Deputy Marshal Reyes signaled his team, but before anyone could react, a familiar voice called out from the porch. Calm, almost kind. It was someone I had known for years, someone who had comforted me after Edward's funeral, someone who had promised to look out for my family. When the door opened, the truth stepped inside. The man smiled as if nothing was wrong. Then his eyes met mine and the smile faded. He said my real name. That was how I knew. The mask dropped quickly after that. He admitted everything in a flat voice. The fire, the cover-up, the years of waiting to see if I would remember. Edward discovering the truth. Edward refusing to let it go. He said Edward had become a liability. He said silencing him had been necessary. He took a step closer. That was the moment fear left me. I did not scream. I did not freeze. I did exactly what Edward had always trusted I could do. I waited for the opening. When it came, I moved. The struggle was brief, messy, real. Agents rushed in, weapons drawn, hands restrained. As they took him away, he looked at me with disbelief. He said he had always thought I would be weak. I looked back at him and told him the truth. The most dangerous people are never the loud ones. They are the ones you underestimate. And for the first time in decades, I knew he was finished. The days that followed blurred together. There were interviews, statements, long hours in sterile rooms with people asking the same questions in different ways. Federal agents cataloged every file, every tape, every transaction Edward had hidden behind that wall. The truth was heavier than I expected. Some of the information led to real crimes, financial fraud, abuse of power, corruption that had harmed innocent people. Those files were handed over without hesitation. Accountability mattered. But others were different. Affairs that ended decades ago, private failures, choices that embarrassed but did not destroy, secrets that hurt no one but the people who carried them. Those files were not justice. They were leverage. And I understood then what Edward had never fully accepted. Holding someone's worst moment over their head does not protect you forever. It only delays the reckoning. With federal supervision, I made the decision Edward never could. The harmful truths went to the authorities. The rest I destroyed. Folder by folder, page by page, watching 40 years of silence turn to ash. Cullen asked me if I was sure. I was. Because I was done living inside a system built on fear. Edward had protected me by controlling the darkness around us. I chose something different. I chose to end it. The renovation was finished in early November. Edward's office no longer existed. In its place was a small library filled with warm wood shelves and soft light, a room meant for reading, not hiding, for reflection, not surveillance. My grandchildren were the first to use it. They sat on the floor with books spread around them, unaware of what that space had once been, and I realized something important. The past does not need to be preserved to be respected. Some things are meant to end. I am still Patricia Monroe. I am also someone who survived a fire, a lie, and a lifetime of quiet danger. Both truths live in me now, and neither controls me. Edward believed protection meant leverage, control, preparation for every possible threat. He was wrong about many things, but he was right about one. People underestimate women like me. Older, quiet, polite. They mistake patience for weakness and silence for fear. That is their mistake. The real art of revenge is not destruction. It is survival. It is refusing to become what tried to break you. It is choosing truth without cruelty and strength without noise. I did not expose secrets to punish people. I exposed the one that mattered. And then I let the rest go. If this story made you think, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes quiet people have no power, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Thank you for watching. And remember this: the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates.